All right, guys, today I want to talk about a topic I think a lot of car owners have been thinking about the last few years: COVID-built vehicles or post-COVID vehicles. Is there actually some legitimacy to this term? And I'm going to tell you a few reasons why I think there actually is some truth to this, but there's also maybe more to the story. So let's do this. All right, first off, if we go roll back the last 4 years and we think about changes in the automotive industry, a lot of things were coming to the market around that time frame. Some of the cars just had the earliest stages of hands-free driving, some of the intelligent adaptive cruise controls. There was all kinds of new ADAS sensors all around the fronts of these cars, including this one behind me, that was coming to market right at the time when COVID hit. That, I think, some of this new technology coming to market is a part of some of these issues we're seeing on some of these modern cars. If we roll back a few years, some cars never had backup cameras before. Like for instance, the Jeep Wranglers. The Jeep Wrangler was one that was always 5-10 years behind some of the other vehicles in the marketplace. It didn't have a backup camera. So you could say it's just a backup camera, and Chrysler makes vehicles with other backup cameras. Very true. But when you go and add a backup camera to a car that's never had a backup camera, now you're running a wire harness back there. You have to make sure it's secured. You have to make sure all the software and hardware is communicating correctly, and that introduces issues with the vehicle. Not that specifically the Wrangler had an issue with the backup camera. I'm just saying it as an example, in the last handful of years is when that technology came to market. Truck behind me. When these trucks, this generation Ford truck, the 2021 model year, was coming to the market, last stages of development, launch process was happening right as COVID was happening. So it's hard enough in the automotive industry to launch a new vehicle program. Imagine tens of thousands of tier suppliers all coming together to start production on one vehicle together. It's a lot to get done right. It's really hard for the car manufacturers to do it right every time. Then add in a world global pandemic where supply chains shut down. Total disaster. And it's not just the automotive industry that's seen this. Every industry saw supply chain interruptions. But what does that really mean? That's, everybody talks about supply chain. What does that mean? So let's just say, as an example, I'm sitting on this bucket here. It's just a standard bucket, right? No big deal. But there's plastics, there's steel, there's seals that go around this, there's stamping processes, there's labor to put these things together. Every aspect of manufacturing a bucket was impacted. Imagine something sophisticated like a vehicle behind us. Imagine how difficult that is. I spent over 20 years in the automotive industry as an engineer, as program management, as sales. I've been in a lot of different facets. I've spent a lot of times in automotive OEM and tier plants and helping kind of bring vehicles to production. And most of us that have been in the automotive industry never saw what happened in COVID, from a supply chain interruption, and it was a big deal. But more so, I think there's actually something else happening, because now we're 4 years after COVID. Why are there still issues? The issues we're seeing today of the quality is, yes, there is some more technology in these vehicles. You're seeing now, like for 2024, even an XLT F-150 comes with a Blue Cruise hardware and software built into the vehicle. That wasn't available in 2023. So there's higher technology in these vehicles, so there's a higher chance of sensors failing and things of that nature, meeting emissions, regulations, blah, blah, blah. But this inflation thing cannot be underestimated. It's a big deal. So imagine every car manufacturer is under pressure from every supplier that before they used to make a little widget. Maybe it's this wheel. Maybe they used to make this wheel for $100, and the company that manufactured this wheel could make a reasonable margin for $100. But then the raw material to make this wheel went up 50%. And then they can't get workers to come in, or maybe now there's more job opportunities where it's hard to get labor, so labor rates went up. And so these manufacturers that are making something as simple as a wheel are struggling now with more expensive raw material, more expensive labor, and they're still trying to bring a competitive solution to their customer, let's say this case, Ford Motor Company. So what does that mean to the end-use customer? In all honesty, this is what it means. Suppliers, car manufacturers, in a lot of cases, are having to open up their specifications for quality. So maybe before they used to have a specification range of like 20 to 80, the low spec 20, the high spec 80. But if they can open that up from 15 on this side to 85 on this side, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they could get more parts out, or they can reduce their cost. which then has less impact to Ford. And then Ford doesn't have to raise the price to the end consumer as much. It might sound crazy, but I've been in this and I've seen this. That's the kind of stuff that's happening. The supply chains have to open up their specs. They have to consider products and solutions and suppliers and raw materials that maybe they've never considered before, but when their raw materials go up 50 or 100% and they've got fixed costs to sell to their customer, they have to come up with ways to improvise. Or here's the alternative, and I saw this a lot in 2020 and 2021, is OEMs, car manufacturers, their assembly plants being shut down. That is a cardinal sin in the automotive industry, is shut down the production lines, because it can cost these companies millions of dollars an hour. You never want to do that. It's like the worst thing you can do in the automotive industry. I saw it happen like 20, 30 times in 2021 across multiple car manufacturers, BMW, Nissan, General Motors, Honda, Toyota, Ford, multiple times, because they couldn't get products, because things got so nasty between suppliers and the OEMs, where suppliers are basically saying, my cost to make this wheel, I used to be able to sell it to you for $100, but now I need to sell it for $200 because my cost has went up. And for me to make the same margin as before, I have to sell it at $200. And then the car manufacturer is like, well, I'm not gonna pay it. And then the wheel manufacturer says, that's fine, we're not shipping you a wheel. And then you know what happens? A production line gets shut down. I've seen this happen so many times. And if you look at a lot of the automotive industry, minus a lot of the different car manufacturers, a lot of the supply base is not financially healthy, or is not in the same financial health they were prior to COVID. I've spent my time working for tier ones, tier twos, and a little bit of time as an internship at an OEM when I was in college, and watching how the supply chain works. It's a really competitive market in the automotive industry, no surprise. There's lots of money to be made. Everybody's fighting for that piece of the pie. But right now, there's a lot of suppliers in the automotive industry that are barely skating by. A lot of them have not been able to increase their prices, and some have went bankrupt. Some have just closed their shop and said, we're done. Others have walked away from customers. All of that, in a lot of ways, was unheard of, but it's all been driven, in a lot of cases, post-COVID. And what's driven this post-COVID is inflation. And it's not just car manufacturers that are struggling with this right now. So the real question is, what can you do about this if you know that quality post-COVID is a problem? And it's a problem across all OEMs. I just saw something like Toyota's got a good reputation for quality, but I looked at the J.D. Power initial quality results from the last 3 years. Every year, the amount of incidents reported for Toyota has went up, which is not like Toyota. They're known for very respectable, reliable vehicles. But then you say, what can you do? Well, number one, I would tell you, if you have a good vehicle and your lease isn't up or you're not forced to buy a new vehicle, I would just hang tight. And after that, if you are in a position, do your homework. Try to find a vehicle that's got a good quality record and it has a good reputation, plus dealer network. You know, one of the reasons I don't own a Toyota is because a Toyota dealership for me is 45 minutes away. I had a Toyota as a company vehicle a while back, and it wasn't bad, but I don't think the quality of that was any better than my last few Fords I've had. And to be fair, going to the dealership there was extremely difficult because I had to pass 15 to 20 Ford dealerships just getting there. There's a lot of Ford dealers around, Chrysler, GMC, Chevrolet. So I want to go to where there's a bunch of dealers around, especially if you're traveling the country a lot. It's just easier to have your vehicle service. But what can you do? Hang tight. Try to get a vehicle that is pre-COVID. I mean, I'm running 2 vehicles that are pre-COVID, and I'm not having that big of issues. But as an example, this truck right here, 2024 Ford F-150 Raptor, beautiful car. I think Ford has done a really good job managing a lot of things, but they're still working out bugs with supply chain, and they're still figuring things out with quality. But if we just look at this truck in general, 5 years ago, these sensors wouldn't be up front. 5 years ago, you wouldn't have this sophisticated active grille shutter in behind a V8. 5 years ago, you wouldn't have sophisticated maybe LEDs that are going up and down. That's a new sort of thing. There's a lot more sensors on this thing. There's a lot more technology. There's a lot more things to fail on some of these more premium vehicles with a lot of sensors. There's a lot to be said about buying a simple truck like this. A Cummins is the most simple diesel engines, inline 6-cylinder. They've been making these things for 30 years. Simple interior. This thing is a basic work truck. literally has hardly any options, doesn't have rear sensors, front sensors, no 360 cameras, doesn't have adaptive cruise, doesn't have lane assist. Guess what? I've had no issues with this truck. It's been great. So to sum it up, I do believe post-COVID vehicle issues are a real thing because of two things. Technology is more increased on these vehicles. There's more sensors. There's more things going on to meet emissions than there were on vehicles 4 years ago. Plus the inflationary impacts. You have to understand right now the inflation in the United States the last 4 years was massive, and it hasn't rescinded really. Inflation's still going up. It's just not as much as it was, but inflation's actually in a lot of ways worse than what's reported because a lot of manufacturers, a lot of companies that have been into producing things are now using raw materials, quality processes, and things that they've implemented to offset some of the cost of goods to do business so that you're only seeing a part of the inflation, but that comes at the cost of lower quality. And just to add a little bit more context to this, imagine inflation is 30%. But if you widen your spec a little bit and accept some raw materials or process changes where, maybe it's kind of something you wouldn't have done before, you can actually reduce maybe your inflation down to say 20%, but it comes at the cost of lower quality products. I've seen it everywhere. I've seen it on snowmobiles, multiple. I had a brand new Husqvarna dirt bike off the showroom floor, a factory race bike, one of 400 made a year, super nice bike with a cracked valve cover on the engine, pouring oil out of the engine. How does that happen? How does it leave a plant like that? Mind blowing. I've had travel trailers during COVID and fifth wheels with air conditioners on the roof that never worked, showers that leaked water, and these were premium brands that everyone says, man, this is a great brand. I've seen it across the board. I don't blame one brand more than any. I think they're all struggling right now. I've seen it on snowmobile trailers. I think the quality, the material choices, selections are less, and the prices are up 50%. Unfortunately, it's kind of a bummer situation, and I don't know when things will go back to normal, but I'm kind of at the point right now where if I'm gonna go buy a new vehicle, I almost want less features because I think it's less things to fail, less problematic, and a good dealer network. Hey, I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching.